Hello, folks. This is another King John Reviews, and I said I was going to review this movie, and I didn't get a chance to. So I'm going to review No Time to Die, the last of the Daniel Craig Bond movies. Um, Let me get this out of the way. Bond has a character, is a very problematic character for a variety of reasons. The misogyny, sex, the sexism. I think Renegade Cut did a great video, which I'll link in the description, that explains, James Bond's character as a whole. I'll put that link later on. But let's just say he's a pretty problematic character. So I saw the Daniel Craig Bonds. I do like them. That they do have some of their issues to the tropes of what Bond is as a character. But one of the issues I have with Craig's Bond is that a lot of the writers did things that I felt Craig's Bond would never do. They just did it because it's James Bond. We have to insert that trope in there. And it's just like, but Craig's Bond would be like, no. You know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff in there in the other previous James Bond movies with Daniel Craig. It just doesn't make sense. Craig as an actor has always been self-aware. He's a really nice guy in real life. He's always been self-aware of what Bond is as a character. He's one of the few actors that just is like, yeah, Bond is a misogynistic asshole. Like he admits that, like he knows that this character he's playing. So he went with a different approach to Bond. When you watch Casino Royale and you go through it, um, in his other films, you see there's a different sort of Bond there in his portrayal. But one of my issues was that Craig's Bond was not. I mean, in certain movies they have him. I just want to get this out of the way because this goes to my point about No Time to Die and why I actually like the movie. I think it's a beautiful film. The thing is, Craig's Bond in the previous films, it never felt right to me that he would seduce women because it made no sense. What I mean by that is his character doesn't really approach that at all. Like Craig's Bond is not Sean Connery. Like he's not that character who's just going to be like, I'm just going to objectify women just because. Like it doesn't feel like that's what his character would do. Because Bond in the Craig films, you can tell that he has feigning a lot of sympathy for some of the women in their circumstances. And there's one particular scene in Skyfall which bothered the fuck out of me because even though the movie was great, that one scene bothered me where I'm just like, she just told you what she went through as a human trafficking person, and you just decide to like sleep with her. What? I mean, that scene, it was just weird, and to me, I felt that was like just forced in there because I don't even think Sam Mendes wanted that freaking scene because he directed Skyfall. Um, I don't even think Sam Mendes wanted to put that in the film because they just had to put it in there because it's a Bond trope. I bet you it's the guys in MGM that said, oh, we have to have that in there because it's James Bond. He's supposed to be a power fantasy. For men, I mean, whatever. Whatever. So we just gonna insert that scene in there. But Craig's Bond, his characterization was not the same as any other Bond, which is why some of the mistakes they made in his movies, it made no sense to me in terms of his character development. It just didn't make sense that his Bond would seduce women because Craig's Bond felt like he had more emotional attachments to the people that he knew than other Bonds did. So Casino Royale, it's very clear that Bond was in love with Eva Eva Green's character, Vesper. He was in love with that woman. It's very clear he was very in love with her, and this is where it ties to No Time to Die because No Time to Die, it follows after, it takes place. It's a movie that is essentially the sequel to Spectre, even though I had issues with Spectre, but that's another conversation. But one of the characters that Bond falls in love with is Madeline. He fell in love with her since Spectre. And in many ways, Madeline is in many ways a spiritual successor slash love interest to the first woman he's always loved, Vesper. Again, Bond in the Craig movies has these attachments. Yes, he's flirty, but he has attachments to certain women in his life that keeps him his relationships wise grounded. He is not like the Connery or the fantasy Bonds where he's like he's having sex with the villains too, and it's like what? You know what I mean? It's not like that like in other Bond films that I think people know what I'm talking about. Where he's just flirty just because, and he's like, oh, he keeps flirting with Money Penny. Craig's Bond, he does it one time, and he's like, nah, you're a friend, we're not doing this. You know, that's kind of the thing. Like, that's what makes him different from the other Bonds, why I kind of like them, even though he is a Bond of the post 9/11 period. So that's when the Bond movies, his Craig era Bond got a bit more realistic. It was a reflection of post 9/11, but I don't know. I just felt like his characterization of Bond is interesting. And he's probably the most one. I give full credit for this. He's probably the most human Bond throughout the entire Bond franchise I've ever seen. I know some people say, "What about Tim Dalton?" I know some folks are gonna bring that up. Yeah, I believe personally that this is my opinion that Craig's Bond is the most human of them. He is the most human. He's the one that has emotions. He has the goals, he has his insecurities. He's the most human of the Bonds. So, No Time to Die's plot, it's really standard, pretty good plot. But what I like about No Time to Die, and I keep bringing this scene up, is because in many ways, No Time to Die is the spiritual sequel, in many ways, to Casino Royale. It is the spiritual sequel to that movie. I would argue that if you want to watch the Craig Bond movies anthology, you basically have to watch 3 movies: Casino Royale, Skyfall, and No Time to Die. In that order. Yeah, you can watch Quantum of Solace, but those movies weren't really not the best. Spectre. So, but Quantum of Solace was. This goes back to also Quantum of Solace. Bond had such attachments. Like, he was so in love with Vesper that he goes on this revenge quest in Quantum of Solace, because that character is the one love interest that he cannot let go of her. He's always like Bond has always loved this Vesper as a character, and Quantum of Solace is an entire revenge plot of him like going after that. Even though the movie wasn't really well done, it's a decent action movie. The plot still says it still continues Bond's relationship with Vesper. But you get the Skyfall. You see, that's when things get a little bit interesting. Skyfall, people, I know about that story. But No Time to Die, it opens up with Bond with the new female love interest that was in Spectre. She's sort of like the new, I'm not going to say replacement, but the new love interest to Bond that is like Vesper. And he really loves this woman a lot, too. You see this in No Time to Die. The movie opens with them in Italy and everything else. I'm just telling you about the opening. And Bond basically, like, at the end of Spectre, he's like, I'm done with this shit. I'm done with the spy stuff. I'm done with this crap, right? And they end up living a life together for a while until shit hits the fan, and Bond is sort of like being pissed off at her for not telling her that this stuff didn't end. And that train scene felt like a breakup. It felt like a weird, felt like a James Bond version of a breakup. It was very interestingly done. But from what I could tell, the opening shot of that movie is Bond going to Vesper's grave, which is in Italy, because in Casino Royale, she died in Italy. So they buried her in Italy. And that's where they went. And I believe Madeline, the woman that he's with currently, told him that, sometimes we have to let go of things, right? And I think she brought him here to Italy for that reason, so he could let go of Vesper. And he goes to Vesper's grave and he says, like, I still miss you. And it's like, yeah, this is who Daniel Craig's Bond is. Like, he's not some dude who's going around flirting with women every 5 seconds, and just like the previous Bond characters that had these sort of huge sexist, racist, ridiculous baggages of of that character. It's very clear that, Craig's Bond is a very different person. So he remembers Vesper, and he's just, because Bond, a female character he's with, he's like, yeah, I'm going to bang you one time, and then I never see you again. It's male power fantasy bullshit. So I like how in the Craig Bond, he holds that emotional attachment with Vesper still, ever since the first film. She died. He still cannot let her go. He said, I miss you. And he's supposed to, like, and it's a sort of tradition in Italy where you have to burn, you burn a piece of parchment, a letter, to basically let go, think of the future. It's like a cultural thing. I think they do that so the movie's pretty accurate. They do that in southern Italy. I do know that's a practice. So I think they're in southern Italy. So that part was really, really, I can't know if it's Sicily or not. I'm not going to get into details. But that part in the movie was really well done. In terms of the action sequence, because it literally opened, like, the movie foreshadows everything. Like, Bond is standing on the grave, and then Spectre leaves like a note and basically planted a bomb in there because, Blofeld knew that Bond couldn't let go of her. He knew that because Blofeld is sort of the main antagonist, overarching, both spiritually and even after his death, low key, is kind of still, because he's the architect of why Vesper was killed. Why Vesper chose to commit suicide in Casino Royale to save Bond's life, essentially, because that's what she did. She basically sacrificed herself in a way to prevent Spectre / Quantum, they had different names, from going after Bond, and she did it to save his life, right? Because she genuinely did fall in love with him. And Bond could never let go of that. And in No Time to Die, it's very clear. Madeline says sometimes you have to let go. And it's clear in the back of Bond's mind, he cannot let go of Vesper. And it begins with the explosion, and he just gets knocked out. What a great scene, by the way. The action scenes in this movie were done amazingly. But throughout No Time to Die, why I like it is that it is, in essence, No Time to Die feels like a romance film. I'm being serious. Like, I was watching the movie and I'm like, this is supposed to be a romance movie. Yeah, it has the action sequences and everything, but this feels like this is supposed to be a romance film. And I like how the main creation of the villain is the British government. The British government is at fault throughout the whole movie of everything that is happening. They are the reason why shit hits the fan. Because it's the British government in this Bond movie that allows the Bond villain to do what they want to do. So it's the British government's fault. So in this movie. So I like that. I like how they did the reverse. It's like, nah, it's the UK's government. It's their fault that this shit is happening. And in many ways led to Bond's demise. But anyhow, at the end. But little meta commentary there. But in terms of how the movie progresses forward, I'm not giving you beats and pieces, but I will give you guys the ending, because I don't know if any of you guys are going to see the movie. Now, the movie does something that's pretty bold. I'm going to put spoilers in this part. If you don't want to watch this part, you can skip this part, folks. But overall, the movie's great. I think it's a romance movie, and I believe it's a romance movie with action elements. And it was very interesting for a Bond movie. There's so much subversion of the Bond tropes in this movie, where it's like, thank you, in 2021, we finally get a Bond movie that just literally looks at the character very differently in our modern period. And in a way, thank you, Daniel Craig, for giving us probably the most human James Bond we've ever had. In my opinion, the best version of Bond. I can actually stomach watching Craig's films, even if there's stuff that sucks in it that they put in there, which I personally think was not Craig or his intention fault. I think it's because of the studio, because they want to continue doing the fucking trope. Because Craig's Bond, there are so many things that happen in these movies with Craig that you watch them and you're like, this is out of character. There's like no way his Bond would do this. In certain aspects. And like, this is why Quantum of Solace and in some instances, and Skyfall, that one particular scene and other scenes, it doesn't make sense. It's like he wouldn't do that. So, especially this version of Bond. I can see a Connery being an asshole doing that. But in other Bonds doing that. But Craig's Bond doesn't make sense. Um, but this is the spoilers. So the review's over. That's the movie. I give that movie a solid 9 out of 10. I really did love that movie. It's a beautiful film. Now to the spoiler part. Now, we all know at the end of the film, Bond does die in the film. He's killed off. There is no, oh, I'm gonna live. No, Bond is gone. Like he is dead. And the sad part about this movie is that you find out that James Bond does have a daughter. He has a daughter with Madeline because it's a 5-year time skip. So he does have a daughter. She's 5 years old. And the whole point of the movie is him going to save Madeline and this other villain who's called Slavin. He has a weird, interesting name. It sounds like Seven, but you know it's in German. He's the main villain. He's the guy from iRobot, Robot, or I forgot the name of that show that he does. That actor. He's the Bond villain, and he's more of a personal villain. It's interesting because he's a personal villain for Madeline, while Blofeld was to Bond and Spectre. So it mirrors each other in a way. But yeah, you find out that Bond is hit with this virus that, you know, this sort of genetically, this weaponized virus that he can't be with Madeline and his daughter. And so he tells them to shoot an airstrike at the island that they're in. And he tells his own government to shoot. So it's interesting that his own government kills him. But meta commentary there. But he does it as a sacrifice because Bond realizes the finality of his life, and he decides, and it's so sad because he went to get the stuffed animal that his daughter had, and he was gonna, like, he didn't get a chance to know her. That's the tragedy of No Time to Die, is that Bond accepts the finality of his life. And it's such a beautiful scene, like, because you don't see this in action movies. You do not see the main character in an action film just like, oh, I'm just dead. You know, it's so rare. It just doesn't happen. And for a major character like James Bond to just accept the finality of his life and just be like, well, if I'm gonna die, you know, fuck it. You know, because especially it's so. I mean, it's a sad scene because he's looking over the thing and the airstrikes are coming, and it's so sad because he has the stuffed animal that he was gonna give his daughter when he saw her again. And Bond at that moment had I mean, I teared up in that scene. It was an emotional scene, guys. I teared up at that shit because fuck, man. Because watching all of Craig's Bond movies, the ending everything just culminated so beautifully, and I just had to cry because I understand the meaning of the ending of the film, and it's just like, wow. Because Bond accepts the finality of his life and accepts that he dies and accepts his death, right? And it's sad he didn't get to know his daughter. And at the end of the film, you see Mathilde driving with her daughter, and she said, and it's such a good trope reversal because it's always like my name's Bond, James Bond, and I love how at the end Mathilde tells her daughter, I'm gonna tell you a story about a man, your father. His name was Bond, James Bond, and I was like, oh man, this hits hard. And they play that Louis Armstrong song, We Have All the Time in the World. Oh man, that movie was emotional. That ending when Bond just accepts, like, yeah, I'm just gonna die. Like I'm gonna accept the finality of my life. And you know, he tells Madeline that she does have my eyes. Right? Because she has Bond's eyes. And he tells her in the radio call, but I think it has a double meaning. He tells Madeline, listen, we have all the time in the world now. We had all the time in the world. That has a double meaning. It's for Madeline because now she could live and be with her daughter without none of the repercussions of Bond and his life interfering. At the same time, the meaning of that line is Bond accepting not only the finality of his life, but the chance that he could actually be with Vesper again. So when he says, we have all the time in the world, he's talking to Vesper from Casino Royale. Because Vesper's dead. She's on the other side, so to speak. If you believe, the supernatural stuff. So she's on the other side. And when Bond says that himself, he says, now we have all the time in the world. It hits home because you know that he can't be with his daughter, but at the same time, it's a happy ending for him because at least in the other side, he could be with the woman that he could not let go, Vesper. He can finally be with her, the woman that he really, not to say Madeline, he loves Madeline. Not to say he loves her just as much as Vesper. But he can be with the woman that he could never let go. And that's why the opening of No Time to Die is amazing. And it's foreshadowing Bond's doom. Because he says that I miss you. He does miss Vesper. He does miss that character. And that's what shows you how different he was from the other Bonds. The attachment he had to people. It just shows the difference. And it's just so sad at the end. Like that Louis Armstrong song playing like that we have all the time in the world. There's nothing more. There's nothing less. Only love. Oh, man. That's just going to tear people up, man. I saw that part in the movie and I'm like, damn. Because Bond accepts the finality of his life, and he just stands there while the missile strike comes and he dies. It's over. He's dead. He is really dead. And but at least Craig's Bond has found peace. I said Craig's Bond, but to me, this feels like, to be honest with you, if they do another Bond movie, I'm really not going to give a shit because this movie felt like it was the final chapter, and it's like, don't even do Bond movies after this, for me. But such a beautiful ending. I mean, it goes right back to Casino Royale with Vesper. I mean, he's like, we have all time in the world. It makes sense. He's talking about Vesper now because he's dead, and he can now be with her on the other side. And that part, I mean, even then now, I'm thinking about the scene. It's getting me a little sad. So it's a beautiful ending. It's so beautiful at the end, and to have the Bond girl survive in the movie, and she's the one relaying the story of Bond who is dead, and have the Bond be the one that is killed. I mean, it's brilliant subversion, and the only tragedy of it is that he never got to. I would have loved to have seen Bond become a father, and interesting enough that particularly he has a daughter, because we all know Bond's relationship with women in throughout the entire series. So I think it's interesting as a meta commentary that Bond has a daughter, and to see Bond become a father for that. I mean, it's very interesting meta commentary there about the character. So No Time to Die was it was a deep movie for me in that sense. And wow, Craig had a great run, and it made sense for Craig's Bond, because this doesn't make sense. Like if Sean Connery's Bond died this way, it makes no fucking sense. Like any other Bond, it makes no sense. But Craig's Bond, absolute sense for him to die tragically the way he did. It makes perfect sense because he never could let go of Vesper, and he always loved that woman, and he can now be with her. And that double meaning of we have all the time in the world. He has all the time in the world now. Now, Madeline can be with with his daughter, their child together, with her, and he can now be with Vesper. I think Bond probably knew that at the last moment of his life. He's like, that's what he meant when he said we have all the time in the world. He was talking about Vesper now. He's like, I can finally go be with her. I'm thinking about that song. It's just such a beautiful song to end it with. But plus it was a great subversion of Your Majesty's Secret Service. Because in that one, Bond's wife gets fridged. But I like the subversion in No Time to Die, where they're just like, no, we're not doing that. We're gonna make Bond get fridged. But beautiful movie, beautiful Bond movie. It felt like it was more like a romance film, but it's good in a good way. And Craig's Bond is probably the most human of any Bond. So that's my review of No Time to Die.